a time when the operation of the machine becomes so odious, makes you so sick at heart that you can't take part. You can't even passively take part. And you've got to put your bodies upon the gears and upon the wheels, upon the levers, upon all the apparatus, and you've got to make it stop. And you've got to indicate to the people who run it, to the people who own it, that unless you're free, the machine will be prevented from working at all.
Australia's best independent news and opinion radio show, The Daily Australian, with Nicola Charles and Jason Olbourne.
And we're back for episode 105 this Wednesday, June the 4th, 2025. And boy, oh boy, it is the middle of the week. The news is absolutely massive. Nicola Charles, welcome to the big show.
Yeah, my husband actually woke me this morning to show me a screenshot of a message that was put out by the Australian government. And he was just so excited, and he said, "Oh my God, you guys did it, all of you did it." And it was just so heartwarming. I know we're going to cover it, Jason, but you know, it's justification, isn't it? Isn't this, we've been absolved basically with everything we've been saying.
We're going to get into the very big story, of course, to do with the government's now new recommendation on COVID vaccines. And then we're going to take you to the United States to show you what it means. We're going to extrapolate it for you, and we're going to take direct quotes from the most powerful people in health now in the world and put it together, because what's coming is the beginning of what we have been talking about for a very, very long time. And people who've been following this show know that I do read a lot of stuff off from Clandestine on X, and what I'm going to read a quote from him is pretty much what I've been saying for years now, that COVID, now whilst we go back to 2017 and we thought that if they were ever going to bring down the establishment for their crimes, it would be for crimes committed in the past. But there was also the possibility that it could be for crimes committed in the present. And in today's news, we're going to cover two precise stories, one being Russiagate, which appears that it may well be the first thing that starts, but then COVID, which happened obviously in real time, right back to that quote from Anthony Fauci when he said that Donald Trump will certainly have a surprise pandemic during his term in office. And then, of course, we saw Event 201, I should say, the trial run really for what was a surprise pandemic that just happened to predict a coronavirus and vaccine hesitancy. And yet here we are on the 4th of June, 2025. Longer than World War II, longer than World War I. Who would have thought that 5 years in the making to get to where we are? And we're still a long way off from justice, but we now see in real time the narrative. And so you'll find that mainstream news in other stories are going to be called out for what they are doing, but they now are the enemy of the people. They no longer serve. And this idea where you have to follow on. And I was just having the discussion last night, Nicola, with one of my friends, and we were wondering why it was where the general public just seems to be oblivious. For example, we were discussing what's happened in Russia and how people just don't quite understand what's going on. It's almost as if people ignore the news. So when they flick it on or they listen to the FM radio and they get a story about the football, the state of origin, an injury to an AFL player, the interest rates went up or down, or the price of fuel, the price of cigarettes, something like that. And that's the general sort of news of the day, apart from a typical Melbourne factory fire, which is, every day there's another factory fire in Melbourne. But unless there's a pandemic and they're forced to watch the news, it's almost like they've been given a free pass from mum and dad in the government to say, yeah, don't worry about the news, just go about your business, go do your work, go to the takeaway, do whatever you're going to do. We don't really care until there's something that you have to follow along with. So it's like that people don't want to know and don't really care. Now, just as I'm saying that, I just remembered something I read from George Christensen, another story, because I've got to cover a couple of things from George today. I'm going to look it up. It was something beautiful that he wrote in a post in an email I received yesterday. And it was to do with local government. And he made the point, government does not instruct us. They're here to represent us. And that was the point. Because when we don't like something, it's up to government to then listen. But what they do is that they tell. And they say in the sales business that telling is not selling. if that makes sense, because you're not listening. And this is the problem with government. This is why people aren't buying what they're saying anymore. And this is why only 1 in 6 Australians are even going down Booster Highway at this stage, justifying that they've got, everyone who takes a booster says, oh, but my immune system's shot. I've got immunosuppression. I've got this, I've got that. Every justification to inject themselves, whereas the rest of society put in their hands and say, no, not doing this anymore. But it's really interesting that this beautiful quote that George wrote, government, they want to instruct us. You're not our rulers, guys. You are there to represent us. And at long last, after we're going to get into it in a sec, we're going to call them out in real time. Exactly right. They've now been forced to represent for once.
Well, it's everyone around me, Jason. It's everyone around me. The chicken farmer sisters who live next door to me, the one who was the most on it, she's very slim, she's very healthy. She's now got Guillain-Barré syndrome, and a carer comes in a car every day to help her walk down 3 steps to go into the back and see her chickens. The other one seems fine, but the one I used to talk to a lot, she's finished and she's frightened, and it's awful. I went into my local countryside IGA and I saw a lady I hadn't seen for a long time, and she just had a 2-kilogram tumor cut out of her uterus. And I said, are you okay? I haven't seen you for ages. She told me about it, and she said, I've got a very rare autoimmune disease I didn't know I had, and I had this tumor and I've been very frightened. And I said, well, you look okay. You're getting better. I was trying to be encouraging. And I said, did they tell you why? Because that's as brave as I'm prepared to get, publicly in a queue right now. And she said, yeah, they told me it's because I had children. And my heart broke. Now, I will tell you publicly on this show, I have the court documents from my husband's divorce and custody battle. I have evidence of Australian judges stating clearly that the parent who is pro-COVID-19 vaccination for their child, and his son was vaccinated twice with Pfizer, which demolished his heart. The parent who is pro-vaccination gets full jurisdiction over health for that child, and the parent who is anti-vaccination, a wait and see approach, is cut out of health decisions for their child. We have documentation in Australia, and I have similar court papers for my own child. I managed to stop it, God knows how. I collapsed in my office, I collapsed on the floor during a Zoom court case when they said it, and I knew they were trying to harm my son. We have evidence of the Australian government and the family court system's crimes against humanity during this period in history. So to wake up this morning and find out, and it makes me very emotional, to find out that the children of this country might finally be protected by the people who are supposed to take care of them, is something, Jason, we shouldn't have had to wait 5 years for. This is worse than thalidomide. What's been done to people, and now we're picking up the pieces because they wanted some round and round money fraud, financial scam, or to reduce the population or replace the population or whatever. Now we have to look at the people we love, my parents-in-law, my stepson, and we have to worry all the time, every time they get a cold or every time they get a blood test and there's an anomaly. And it's absolutely disgusting that we've had to wait this long, and these people go out there and tell us they're leaders and they know what they're doing. You've harmed people. If your name right now is a bureaucrat and you're with the Labour Party or the Liberal Party or the Greens or any of these people that have had votes and you've made the votes swing in a particular way, you are culpable, and your names will be mud in the future. Mud. I'll make sure of it as long as there's breath in my body.
When we asked you to simply read what we read, to form an opinion, to realize that it can't possibly be a one-size-fits-all approach, you didn't do it. You told us that we were cookers and that we were crazy and that authority knew what they were doing and they were sticking to these stories. Shame on you, because everyone could see that Anthony Fauci was manipulating. We have seen countless videos of him saying masks yes, masks no, masks twice. You can't change your mind from left to right, up and down, and both be right. It's a manipulation. And yet, absolute power consistently wanted to maintain absolute power and ignored everything else. Well, when that time comes, you will be held to account. And in this country, you're lucky we don't have the death penalty, because that's what people will deserve that did this to others, that took away and shortened their lives. What we're going to do now is play. Well, firstly, I'm going to show you this important document that we've just seen, and then we're going to get into the details where it goes from here. So this is what, Nicola, what you're talking about. Healthy infants, children and adolescents aged under 18 years are not recommended to receive the COVID-19 vaccine. Let me read what it says highlighted in yellow. COVID-19 vaccine is not recommended for healthy infants, children or adolescents who do not have medical conditions that increase their risk of severe illness. This is because the risk of severe illness was extremely low in this cohort over the course of the pandemic, and benefits of vaccination are not considered to outweigh the potential harms. Updated 3 June 2025. Didn't we say to you throughout COVID, Daniel Andrews, Gladys Berejiklian, that lunatic from Northern Territory, Michael Gunner, the Premier of West Australia, South Australia, Tasmania, Scott Morrison, Brad Hazard, Kerry Chant, Brett Sutton, Jane Halton, you get a mention, up in Queensland, Anastasia Palaszczuk, and the woman that you made the governor. Didn't we say to you all along that the survival rate was 99.99%? And not one single female in Australia under the age of 50 died from COVID before the vaccine hit the market. Not one. And fewer than 8 were males. And out of those under 50, they all had severe comorbidities. And in one case, there was a little boy who died at the age of 4. They said he died from COVID. He had a particular strange genetic disease that he wasn't even meant to live to the age of 2. And you called it COVID, you bastards. You lie. And therefore, you're in trouble.
How was it our fault when we also know that this was engineered by the hands of man in a lab in China? And you force people and threaten to take their jobs after they've essentially been biologically attacked. Your job as leaders was to protect us, was to tell us the truth. Sure, give options, make offers of options. There were no advertisements telling people to get vitamin D, sunlight in Australia. In fact, they locked us down and told us we couldn't go outside for more than an hour a day, which probably caused people to die. They didn't tell people to juice oranges and get vitamin C. They didn't tell us about zinc. They didn't tell us about any of the things that could have helped. Instead, they rolled out something that would make it worse. So it's good to know, Australia, and I'm just talking to you, Australia, because I love this country and I love the people. It's good to know that in a crisis, the very last people we can rely on is you, those getting paid to be public servants. Thank you so much.
Now, what I'm going to do now is we're going to go back to last week for a video that we played that was pretty exciting at the time, but we didn't quite know everything that it meant. I'm going to replay it for you now. It's only just under a minute. Let's start the story from here.
Hi, everybody. I'm Robert F. Kennedy Jr., your HHS Secretary, and I'm here today with NIH Director Dr. J. Bhattacharya and FDA Commissioner Dr. Marty Makary. I couldn't be more pleased to announce that as of today, the COVID vaccine for healthy children and healthy pregnant women has been removed from the CDC recommended immunization schedule. Last year, the Biden administration urged healthy children to get yet another COVID shot despite the lack of any clinical data to support the repeat booster strategy in children.
That ends today. It's common sense and it's good science.
There's no evidence healthy kids need it today, and most countries have stopped recommending it for children.
We're now one step closer to realizing President Trump's promise to make America healthy again.
Produced by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services.
So that's as official as it can possibly get. However, just to pay attention to what's really going here. This is why it's so important, the detail in what we're doing. And I think this is what's going to separate independent news now from the mainstream, simply because of the detail and the level of knowledge that and the collective memory from people at this side. So let's put it together for you. So we saw this after that announcement. Karen Kingston reported that the CDC is still recommending that the COVID vaccine, everyone aged 6 months and older is recommended to get the updated COVID vaccine, even if you are pregnant, etc., etc. And they're calling it routine vaccination. They're still saying it. Covered that story yesterday. Now, here is why this is probably going to start making you think, okay, now I get it. This is why Bobby Kennedy is in that very unique position, because his interest is health, but he's actually a lawyer. Take a look at this. We're going to go back in time a little bit.
So what are your views on giving this COVID vaccine that they've made to kids? I know I'm from Canada, and I think that they're implementing that in order to go to school in Canada.
Well, they have to give it to kids because here's why. They cannot market this vaccine without having immunity shield. So, I mean, I sue pharmaceutical companies for a living, and I have enough criminal activity that I know about Pfizer at this point and Moderna, that if they went ahead and marketed a vaccine where they end up killing people or injuring them, and I can sue them, well, they'd be through. So they're never going to market a vaccine, allow people access to a vaccine, an approved vaccine, without getting liability protection. Now, the emergency use authorization vaccines have liability protection under the PrEP Act and the CARES Act. So as long as you take an emergency use, you can't sue them. Once they get approved, now you can sue them, unless they can get it recommended for children.
What?
Because all vaccines that are officially recommended for children, get liability protection, even if an adult gets that vaccine. That's why they're going after kids. They know this is going to kill and injure a huge number of children, but they need to do it for the liability protection. And here's how they know that it's going to injure kids. During the Pfizer study, they only tested it on 1,300 children. And one of those, we now know, was a girl called Maddie Gary. We only know about this because she and her family came forward and told us what happened. Maddie Gary got the vaccine. She immediately went into seizures. She is now in a wheelchair for life, and she needs a feeding tube to eat. So Pfizer, because Pfizer only tested on 1,300 kids, it is stuck with the extrapolation. And 1 out of every 1,300 kids is going to be injured like that, an injury worse than death. Pfizer did not report her injury. Instead, it said she had a stomach ache. So that's what they reported to the FDA. They lied.
How about that?
Our children were a financial protection tool. They were happy to maim and kill little innocent children so that they wouldn't get sued.
That's right.
That's some kind of clear leadership and governance, isn't it, Jason?
When you make deals with the devil, this is what you do. We already knew that Pfizer was a criminal organisation, having paid out billions of dollars in fines pre-COVID jab for other indiscretions, for want of a very euphemistic term, if you will. So we knew what we were dealing with, or at least we did as independent reporters who weren't even reporting back at the time. And this is what forced us to become independent news people in this country. So we now know what Bobby Kennedy is there to do. This is why I spoke for a couple of years about why I thought he should be the Attorney General, because it was so important. But he chose to go down a different pathway because he's literally fossicking for the evidence firsthand. Now, in a little while, we're going to get to our next story about how the FBI has literally hid evidence from the new director, which is just extraordinary. But in the meantime, we've got more to say on this story. I want to play now Jay Bhattacharya in a recent interview. It's also quite long, but it's good to get a perspective from the horse's mouth. And the conclusion confirms everything that we've already known, that this thing was man-made.
What we have done is we, including the NIH, has supported a research program with the utopian vision of preventing all pandemics. The way the research program has worked is that we fund people, EcoHealth Alliance once upon a time, to go out into the wild places, partner with foreign countries, including China, go out in the wild places, collect the pathogens in the bat caves or wherever.
Picking up bat droppings.
Right, so that we can catalog all of the viruses and pathogens out there.
Right.
Even if it's very unlikely that many humans will come in contact with those things. Bring those viruses and pathogens into labs, often in city centers, often not necessarily in high security environments. Do research on them to see if it's easy to manipulate them and cause them to become more transmissible among humans. And the idea is, if we can identify those viruses and pathogens that are more likely to make the leap into humans, then we can prepare in advance. We can create vaccines and antivirals or whatever before they make the leap in the population, so that when they make the leap, we are already ready. Right. There's two major problems with that. One of it working, which it doesn't, and then one of its safety, which it's not. First, if you make a study of a pathogen you found in the wild places that have never really ever infected humans before, and you create vaccines or whatnot to combat it, when they actually make the leap, evolution still works, right? It's not going to be the same virus you cataloged. These viruses evolve
very quickly
all the time. And so you have a snapshot from 10 years ago when you went to the bat cave, but you don't know what they look like now. And the vaccines and things that you've produced to try to prepare, you've never tested them on human populations before because no human had ever gotten the disease.
Okay.
So this is a foolhardy way you pretend to yourself that we protected ourselves against a pandemic when we haven't. Second, the actual conduct of this research is very dangerous. And I think it's very likely that the COVID pandemic was the result of this kind of research agenda. Because it's not possible to guarantee, even in high security labs.
Are you prepared to say that the preponderance of evidence now is that COVID arose from a leak from a gain of function lab in Wuhan?
Yes.
Is that the position?
That's my position.
Okay.
And I believe it's also the position of various intelligence agencies of the government, as well as other governments as well that have.
So the guy that became Anthony Fauci's replacement boss, head of NIH, not head of NIAID, has now said it has come from a lab after Fauci told us it came from a bat, and Fauci was able to influence Joe Biden's administration to get Joe Biden to send the fellow from the EcoHealth Alliance, Peter Daszak, over to Wuhan to do a pretend investigation to say we couldn't find any evidence of. This is where we're at now. So we've replaced the bad guys with the good guys who've called it out in real time. Now, whilst we were playing that clip, I went onto my X feed to find another clip. Now, the thing was...
Can I just say something on that, right, on that clip? The Earth, as was stated by George Carlin yesterday, is 4.5 billion years old.
Mm.
In 4.5 billion years, human activity has been here between 2 and 6 million years. In all of those millions of years, none of these scary so-called pathogens, which remain hidden in probably the Amazon rainforests and bat caves in China or wherever, none of them have jumped naturally into human populations. Why? Because these animals and these plants, or whatever it is that create these deadly pathogens, they purposefully exist away from humans. Of course they do, especially now in 2025. We use bleach, we use chemicals, we have noisy cars, we have towns and cities that for nature are so repugnant and so dangerous. The only things brave enough from nature to wander into cities are bears in Canada, because they've developed a bit of a taste for leftover pizza. So unless someone like Bill Gates and EcoHealth Alliance venture out, as they are trying to do, this is the plan of the one world government, to grab these dangerous things from nature to fiddle with them in a lab, and we now know they're so untrustworthy to even study this stuff, never mind retrieve it, they are going to bring them in and have possibly already brought them in to the human population. This is eco-terrorism. This isn't science. They call it the science. This is a different kind of science. My mum worked in a level 4 laboratory for 37 years for a company, Merck, who most people would have heard of. And they made, in her particular business, they made plastic, acrylic knee, hip and back joints for people during operations. In petri dishes, she grew things like MRSA, flesh-eating bugs, to find out what kind of reaction that would have to their product of plastic knee, hip and back joints. Not once in 37 years did any of these pathogens, germs, diseases, whatever you want to call them, leak from her laboratory in the UK. These people are actively bringing this stuff into human populations, and they have to be stopped, because I'll tell you why. They're not doing this for any kind of philanthropic reason. They are doing it for profit. This is problem, reaction, solution. They want to bring this stuff in. They want to cause a problem so that they can financially benefit from providing the solution. And last time, their solution caused mass harm. They have to be stopped.
And it looks like they're going to be. Now, here's the reaction from Pocahontas, Elizabeth Warren. This is the best that she can come up with.
Or profitable. In fact, he may have the opportunity to bankrupt the vaccine manufacturers, and then nobody gets vaccine.
Great.
I don't see the problem, Pocahontas, but isn't that unbelievable? So if he bankrupts them, which she agrees that he could because of what they did, well, you won't be able to be maimed by them anymore. Thank you, Elizabeth Warren.
She's saying that business is more important than humanity. That's what that's saying. Oh, we can't do this to a business. We can't cause a business to lose money. But you're talking about the future of mankind, and they're putting business ahead of it. It's ruthless and it's idiotic. I don't understand.
I can't understand how something that can maim one person can save another. I think the whole thing is nonsense. I just refuse to accept that you can. It just can be profit. There are very sick individuals involved here, sick in the head, that have this eugenics approach that is beyond anything that we could ever accept. I understand that profit is part of it. I just don't see it as the full motive. I think it's the byproduct of the devil at work, which is to kill, destroy, and maim, and will profit in the process. And that profit will insulate us against anyone who dares speak up against us, because we'll just buy out the opposition, we'll pay for the big legal fees, and we'll hammer anyone who dares take us on. And the system, just the wheels on the bus go round and round. It's a big racket. Well,
that was the famous quote. That was the famous quote from Event 201 from a banker, Jason. She said, "We have learned how to profit from pain." Yeah, and I was floored.
Unbelievable, isn't it? Well, now I just want to round out this report before we get on to the rest of the day's news. This is RFK Jr. again, giving you the ultimate in proving to you that this vaccine, well, it's not really as good as you were told. Take a look.
During COVID, we had the highest death rate of any country in the world. So that
is astounding.
We had 16% of the COVID deaths, and we only have 4.2% of the world's population. we literally had the worst record of any country in the world. And it's a wonder that people are getting awards and recognition and kudos for managing COVID. Whatever we were doing, it was utterly wrong. And if you ask CDC, why did we die at higher rates? And we died at rates that were, in some cases, like Haiti had a death rate. Haiti, if you remember at the beginning of the pandemic, we were told the poor countries of Africa are going to be devastated by this because they can't get a hold of the vaccines. Haiti is the poorest country in the hemisphere. It had a 1.3% vaccination rate, so virtually nobody got a vaccine.
Right.
They had a COVID rate of 14 deaths per million population. We had a death rate of 3,000 per million population. American blacks had a death rate of probably 3,600 per million population.
That is incredible.
We had 200 times the death rate of Haiti. We had 200 times the death rate of Nigeria, which had a 1.4% vaccination rate. Oh, and there's other reasons for that. Those are younger populations, which were less affected by COVID deaths. They're out in the sun more, and they've got a lot of other, advantages in that situation. But, there's something wrong with our country.
Yeah.
Africa as a whole at about 360.
There were high morbidity death tied to deficiencies in vitamin D3. There
was a direct inverse correlation between vitamin D saturation and COVID.
And COVID mortality.
Yeah.
So Haiti.
So let me read this out to you. I always kept this. This is the AMA, the Australian Medical Association. Congratulations to Dr. Kerry Chant, who received the Australian Medical Association's President's Award for her medical leadership throughout the pandemic.
There you go. The system protecting the system. And that's how authority works. Authority is not the truth. Truth is the authority. And that's the difference between independent news here on the Daily Australian and the nonsense that gets fed into the system that you all have to believe out there in the mainstream. What's interesting, of course, is when they cross over and we report the same story from the same perspective. And that's when you know that we have, we're going to only do what the truth is, and they're going to have to be dragged into it kicking and screaming. Well, to move on with the show halfway through, the next story that we should cover is one. I'm going to go to the graphic first for you. This is a story that popped up after we recorded yesterday. Check this out. This is the FBI and Mueller's team hid Russiagate documents with a special coding in FBI case management. So what they have is a system called Sentinel. It's the database that they use, and they've actually hidden some of this information. So if you went to go for a search term on a particular thing linked to it, they would hide it so you couldn't actually find it. So they used a prohibited access code to make Russian collusion documents invisible. This way, Mueller's Democrat lawyers could hide exculpatory evidence. Recall that General Flynn was forced into a guilty plea of one count of false statements after partisan prosecutors tricked him and withheld Brady material. Now, Nicola, Brady material, Brady rule, stems from the Supreme Court case Brady versus Maryland, dictates that the prosecution has a constitutional duty to disclose all material, exculpatory evidence to the defense in a criminal trial. This means that any evidence that could potentially help the defendant or undermine the credibility of the prosecution's case must be shared, regardless of whether the defense specifically requests it. So, what has happened is that they have built into the system a way of hiding exculpatory evidence which gives them plausible deniability. But here's what's happened. A couple of weeks ago, we had an interview that we saw with Dan Bongino, the Deputy Director of the FBI, and the Director of the FBI, Kash Patel. This is them specifically discussing this breakthrough in the discovery of evidence here. Have a look.
I was the lead Russiagate investigator for the House Intelligence Committee, and I've been on both your shows in a prior life talking about it. And I'm telling you and the American public that we have now found material and information and people who wanted to hide it from the world since we got in these seats. And we, as the deputy said, we are trying to do it in a fashion where not only are we informing the American public of what happened, but we can have accountability for it. And that takes a little bit more time. And when you layer on the fact that we are rolling out our priorities on violent crime and defending the homeland, we're running a three-part animal here, and we're going 100 miles an hour on each single one.
So important.
Wait, I want to add to that too, because what the director's saying is right. You got to remember, we come in the morning, there's a portfolio of 100 level 10 items. If it's a level 9, which is a pretty big freaking deal, someone else fixed it. The only thing that gets to my desk or his is a level 10. That's the entire day. Look at his schedule any given day. I'll show you the palm card I have. It is filled from 7:30 to he leaves 7 at night, 6:30 at night. It's filled all day. We just can't focus on one thing. You want New York to go boom? DC to go boom? You want an OC organization to go hack into some cyber network and crack all of Fox News' holdings? We're dealing with all that stuff too. Everything's a priority. Everything's a priority. This is one of many things we're doing. It's not an excuse. It's just reality.
Powerful information.
I am not reassured ever by Kash Patel's 1,000-yard stare. He's learnt some shit. Like, he knows some stuff has gone on, and you would look like that. You would look reasonably terrified, and he does look terrified in the eyes, whether he's terrified about his own personal safety or the truth of what he knows. Now, you mentioned before about hiding the Russiagate stuff, and constitutions, I am learning, are just for us down here on the ground. Constitutions are used to keep us in line and make sure we adhere to law and order, but not the elites, and certainly not governments, which is wrong, because no government is above the law, and yet they have been operating outside the law for the last 5 years. I said to you off air, I believe we're in a 10-year war from 2020 to 2030 at least. We're essentially in the Hunger Games. Someone has used an Autopen and its open slather on global populations, and it has to be brought to an end now because enough damage has been done. As you heard, 16% of COVID deaths were American, and they have something like 4.2% of the population. Now, what we're looking at is a crime scene cover-up. I've said this before. That's why they use those mechanisms to hide information. Why do you hide information? You hide the truth because it's a crime scene cover-up. And these people, the FBI, are experts at crime scene cover-up. This is the danger of the digital world. This is the danger of digital ID. You know, I'm sitting here recording the show with you now, but AI is capable of taking the fingerprints that I gave to enter the country and putting them at a crime scene across town, and also the IP address of my phone to say I was close to the area. AI can zip in and change that and make you a criminal like that in a heartbeat. And you can have 3 people stood around going, no, sir, no, officer, she was here all morning. It doesn't matter. They'll say DNA doesn't lie. AI doesn't lie. The data doesn't lie. Yes, it does. Data does lie. And those guys and their actions have just proved it to you.
Well, we are in the midst of the old FBI being exposed by the new FBI, people wanting to see arrests, etc. There is obviously a plan in place, or there isn't, but it feels like that things are lining up in a way that you've never could expect, and the speed at which it's happening. So today we've now learned, here you go, Trump's Justice Department is now examining the pardons issued by Biden. This came out June 2. A senior official in President Trump's Justice Department told staff Monday that he has been directed to investigate clemency granted by Democrat Joe Biden in the waning days of his presidency to members of his family and death row inmates, and that is Ed Martin, who will be doing leading said investigation. There's also a clip that I'm going to play for you now, and this is Peter Doocy referring to
the ones at the last minute where we were sitting in the booth, looking at our computer screens, waiting for the transfer of power. When we started getting all these emails, here's one for Mark Milley, here's one for the whole Biden family, here's a separate one for Hunter. Were those all done with President Biden's knowledge? That is something that the Justice Department is now investigating. Would love to find out why they are so sure that there is something to that. Jackie?
All great questions. We are awaiting those answers eagerly.
So the Autopen is on. If Joe Biden wasn't the one in charge doing said pardons, then the pardons don't hold. Anthony Fauci was one said beneficiary. So I'll tell you what.
But who was it? I want to know who was it that used the Autopen. This is the problem. We need to expose these people because that person is guilty of subversion of American democracy and worse. So we need to find out. It's not just, are those pardons legitimate or not? Of course they're not. No pardon, no law, no legislation, no act, no executive order is legitimate without a human hand on a pen and pen to paper. So likely more than 50% of the Joe Biden presidency now stands illegitimate. And I want to know who was in control of America at that time, because whoever was in control of America at that time was having a fallout effect on us down here in Australia.
Absolutely, and there are names being rumoured that are being spoken of, but that will come out obviously in time. Now, I'm going to play you a clip now. This is what's happened today in Crimea. It's a short clip of an explosion. We'll come back and we'll talk about that now. So that's just a video there of the explosion. And what we have learned is that the Kerch Bridge...
Why was that camera waiting to film that before it happened? And it wasn't a static camera. It wasn't a security camera. It was moving around. Again, why was that there?
Well, we can't give you an answer for that one at the moment. We can say that we've obviously got a recording of it, but this was an underwater strike with a lot of TNT, leaving the bridge in a state of disrepair. And of course, they seem to be cheering it on. It's quite interesting that this case is going on. Do they not expect Putin to retaliate at some point? Like, what is to be gained from these attacks in the middle of said negotiations? Is it to flex their muscle? Is it to say that they've got some more power? Do they not realize that? And so it can only be, for mine, that they are trying to egg on Putin to try and launch said nuclear attack so that they can then retaliate. And is this what they want to do? Rule over the ashes of a burnt earth? Is that the outcome for these lunatics in power?
One of my geopolitical, quite informed citizen journalists believes that when I was talking about incitement to violence yesterday, it's because they actually want the deep state, NATO, whoever, they actually want Russia to strike Ukraine because, again, crime scene cover-up, these biolabs in Ukraine and everything that was going on in Ukraine, and they need a scorched earth situation in Ukraine. I'd be very worried if you're living in Ukraine right now. I'd be very worried. I mean, if there's ever a country that we should be expecting refugees and migrants from, it's Ukraine. We seem to be getting it from all the other countries that are just fine, or we're told they're fine. Where are all the migrants and refugees from Ukraine? Get them over, because they're in a very dangerous situation. Because if this person is right and they want Ukraine taken out to destroy the evidence, then they're in a very bad situation. By the way, let me just say as an aside, Jason, this is very important. Yesterday, I took my daughter out for lunch to a lovely place in Victoria on the Mornington Peninsula called Merrick. It's very cute. There's a place there called the Merrick Store. You can have lunch, you can buy gifts, all that kind of thing. But one thing I noticed driving through that part of the countryside, and I don't know if they're new, I hadn't noticed them before, but all of the council signs that give you the names of an area, it's near Frankston, it's near Tyab, they look exactly like the Ukraine flag. They're that particular blue and yellow. And I thought, that is so strange. And I started to wonder, is the one world government flag that blue and yellow Ukrainian flag? Because it's on our council signs in Victoria. And I also shared yesterday on my X account a picture of the Australian government's new push for people to put their children in kindergarten so they can nick off to work because one income's not enough anymore, thanks to their economic measures. And all of the flags are on there for kindergarten, the LGBTQI plus flag, the trans flag, and the Indigenous flag, no Australian flag. They haven't had the nerve yet to put the one world government Ukraine flag on there. But why are all of these signs? And it's not like it's a bit blue and yellow. It's the colors. I looked at it and I thought, that's the Ukraine flag, Jason.
That's really interesting, isn't it? Can you explain to me Pride Month? I don't understand it. I just don't get it. Why do I need a month to celebrate where you put your genitalia?
Look, I get lambasted when I say this. I have a gay daughter, but she's also very smart and a conservative. She doesn't understand it either, We have in this country, Australia, always celebrated and accepted the gay community. The biggest fun I ever used to look forward to when I got minimal time off when I was working in television was Pride at New Year in Sydney, which was an all-night dance party that I should have been old enough and wise enough to know not to go to. And it was so much fun, and the gay community was so welcoming. There was lots of celebrities there, you know, it wasn't just me. And also Mardi Gras, which, as you know, Jason, as you know, has always been absolutely huge in Australia. And then, you know, it was known that Australia was the most progressive country on earth that way. Shortly afterwards, they tell us all we're homophobic, we're transphobic. After we stood at the side of the road and clapped and cheered for all the drag queens on the floats in Mardi Gras, they're liars. It was division. It was something else. We know what it was. It was very, very dark. Do we need a Pride Month? Every gay person and gay couple that I know avoids that stuff like the plague. They have lovely homes in Dalesford. They've exited the city. They don't want to know. They know they're not stupid. They're gay. They're not stupid. And they know that the community is being targeted and used, just like Indigenous tribal people are starting to speak out because they know that their communities are being used, you know, government agendas. So the people painting the freeways rainbow and doing all that stuff, be reassured, it's actually not the gay community. It's not. It's your government.
It's extraordinary, isn't it? I never understood it from a government perspective, though. If it's a minority group, why you would push it so hard to offend the majority, or at least annoy the majority. Dare I say the word offend, being the majority? Can the majority be offended? Heaven forbid we even say that. It's a strange situation. Now, it was going to come up a little bit later, but I think it's appropriate to bring it up now. This is a story that appeared in Murdoch Press today, and I've sort of cut up bits for it to explain the story for you now. So here it is. We read the story. Would you believe it? It announces Australian porn star Kobe Fawkes, 42, dies suddenly. Okay, dies suddenly. So then we read the next, and that's the fellow on the right with the hat on. Matthew Lee, founder of the Melbourne-based PR firm that Fawkes was signed to, shared an emotional Instagram following the tragic news alongside the hashtag mental health matters, implying that it was suicide. So why say die suddenly? Just say dies. Anyway, here's the bit
because
that
they rub it in your face. They like to rub it in your face.
But here's the bit that threw me, is the final paragraph you can see down the bottom. It was an honour to represent his remarkable body of work and to witness firsthand the power of his presence both on and off the screen. He was a porn star.
Well, whoever wrote that story was a fan of his immense body of work. I mean, that's extraordinary. You know, there's a weird thing happening in the Australian press. Oh, stop the press. Weird thing happening in the establishment media. Everything from the establishment media is weird and whack right now. And they say we're weird. They're totally weird. There's this mass celebration. I know that's a story like he's a gay porn star and it's Pride Month and it feels like, but it's not, because there's that now very famous, like Australia's Kim Kardashian. There's that horrendous story of an OnlyFans porn star in Australia. She's quite a young blonde girl who did this thing where I think in a 24-hour period, she slept with like 500 guys and ended up in hospital bleeding. And everyone was like, oh my God, we shouldn't take care of her. You know, it was a bit like COVID, leave the unvaccinated to die. And some people, the comments under the post were just hilarious. I didn't want to comment because I used to shoot men's magazines and I thought it's a bit hypocritical. But the comments were like, leave her alone. It's a workplace injury. Anyway, she's looking to double that. So that's aside a really distasteful story. But the Australian media, because it's all distraction. Look, we talk about Russia and Ukraine, and we talk about the deep state, and we talk about NATO, and we talk about what's going on with health. The establishment media are talking about what's going on with porn stars. Yesterday on my X account, Jason, you probably haven't seen it yet, but I posted from the news in Australia, the real news, apparently, on your real TV. Because all that's happened is that these diabolical people own TV stations. Their entire news segment was a promotion, an advert for a BlackRock-owned supermarket in Australia. Saying down, prices are going down, right? And it's up, surveillance has gone up. That supermarket. And it went on and on. Sorry, I'm so excited. I've knocked my mic. And I was watching it thinking there will be an actual news story in part of this, right? Where, you know, you'll have a customer crying, going, oh, thank God, you know, I can afford my favorite food again, you know, whatever. There was no human interest story. It was a massive commercial from beginning to end. These people have got some balls. Now you know, hello, now you know who's controlling your establishment media because they're using your news for a big advert, right?
Absolutely. It used to be called cash for comment, but these days it's called, consumer awareness or something like that. If there was any form of consumer awareness, avoid the big corporates. And there is a push.
Well, they're selling you vaccines and now they're selling you that food. So think, people, think.
Yeah, good call. Well, there has been a push to break up the supermarkets. It'll be interesting to see what happens there. And of course, they will talk themselves out of it because they'll say it'll force prices up, and that'll be the reason why we have to negotiate with terrorism.
Terrorists.
Now, here we go.
Snap.
Well, exactly. Well, here we go. Here's another one for you on the same subject. 2 Chinese nationals have been charged with smuggling potential agroterrorism fungus into the United States, reports the Department of Justice. Authorities said it was in connection with work at the University of Michigan. So 2 Chinese nationals there have been arrested, as the headline says. And I'm just trying to find that story.
Is that a fungus that has a patent or a fungus that's found in nature? If I can give you one tip, people did like the other day when I looked for the patent number online of that particular fungus, and they were like, oh, that's brilliant. It's the first thing you should do when they start telling you about new strains or fungus or bird flu or any of that stuff. Look up, does it have a patent? If it has a patent, they made it. That's how it works.
Yep, exactly. Well, this one's called Fusarium graminarium, which scientific literature classifies as a potential agroterrorism weapon. So Yung Jingjian, 33, and Zhang Zhonglu, 34, citizens of China, were allegedly receiving Chinese government funding for their research, some of which the University of Michigan, which was at the University of Michigan, said the feds have said it's a dangerous pathogen that can devastate crops. There you go. If you want
Isn't
a famine,
that an act of war, Jason? That's an act of war.
Well, they're calling it agroterrorism, so the DOJ onto that one. So that is a big deal, once again, but nipped in the bud. Now, meanwhile, talking about economics, here we have a story came up, it was a couple of weeks ago now, I think, breaking. President Trump's tariffs have reportedly not impacted prices or consumer demand, per Amazon CEO Andy Jassy. And today Trump comes out and says, because of tariffs, our economy is booming. So the opposite of what we were told, of course, in the mainstream media. But of course, you don't believe the billionaire businessman who became president twice, possibly 3 times. You would never, you wouldn't believe him. You just believe everyone who is against him. That's what we're up against. And other news in brief, this is another horrendous story. A teen who was molested by an illegal alien who Biden admin sent her to live with, police say. Well, he's been arrested. Elon Musk sharing that tweet on X and says this is not even the tip of the iceberg. So one would assume that Musk would have some knowledge there of what is going on. So this 37-year-old illegal immigrant was arrested for allegedly sexually abusing at least one teen girl who the federal government sent to live with him as part of the Biden administration's scheme to place unaccompanied alien children in the homes of unrelated, loosely vetted sponsors.
Can I give you a tip? Can I give you a tip that this is someone who works in government that I know. I won't say where. In Victoria. This is the person that in 2021, when I got very worried, lost my radio job, was clearly not going to get another job because I wouldn't comply. Said to me on the phone, I remember exactly where I was standing. It was like I knew where I was at 9/11 and all that. It was such a pivotal moment in my life. And I was like, I'm finished. I'm wiped out. How am I going to take care of my kids? I don't have enough savings for this, And she said to me, wait a couple of years and you can have any job you want. The phone went quiet and I said, are you saying what I think you're saying, with regard to the remedy? And she hung up. Now, the same person recently said to me, because she knows I'm sort of investigative journalist head, she said, if you want to know who is involved in the paedophile rings, look up which wealthy people in the country own piggeries. And I thought, piggeries? Because she believes that you cannot dispose of children that have been abused unless they go to these piggeries and they are literally fed. So if there's any citizen journalists out there now, I've told you before, my heart's beating now. I've told you before my own personal reasons why I cannot spend my time hunting these people. I can't do it. I feel ill just talking about it because of my own personal experiences. But you take that and you run with it. That came from someone extremely credible.
Well, there was one former prime minister who, very well known, invested in a piggery many years ago. I don't believe that individual still owns the piggery, but that tells you a lot. And there is a connection with that person and the daughter and the Epstein. So most people will be able to put that one together there. And I'm not saying, I don't have to say much more than that. Now, whilst we're going to go down this pathway, I'm just going to veer it slightly for you. Andrew Bridgen, former UK MP, he was interviewed recently in a podcast. And one thing for Andrew is that his background's never particularly good.
Jason, can I ask you not to run a clip if you've got a clip?
Okay, do you know the clip?
Don't run the clip.
All right, we won't run it, but this is a really interesting story nonetheless in relation to Starmer and the people that were caught in the arson attacks on the property. So that's an interesting one there with Andrew Bridgen. So you can look that one up.
Weren't they prostitutes from Ukraine or something?
That's the connection there. So, and interesting. So Bridgen then goes on to mention what he thinks is going to happen in Ukraine in terms of replacing the leadership over there for what is really going on there. So that's so that one, we'll park that one for the moment. Now, meanwhile, just working through the final stories, a little bit of good news. This is from Argentina. Guess what? Their economy is booming under Javier Milei last month.
So's his hair growth.
That's true. It's the best hair in the world, isn't it? So there it is, April, recording 8% economic growth ahead of 5.6, 6.7 after last year going backwards eternally. So things looking really good there in Argentina. Now,
bit of argy-bargy. That's what we call that in England, bit of argy-bargy. We never liked the Argentinians because of the Falklands War. And every time we played them at soccer, they were like, all right, we're up for a bit of argy-bargy. Well, you know what, England, Britain, the Argentinians are wiping the floor with you politically. So take note.
There you go. Now, look, there's been more developments in the Diddy trial. It's going a bit crazy there. It looks like it. I mean, without trying to tell you what's going on, it looks almost certain that this man is going to be convicted. Right. That's what we'll say there. Like, it's obvious at this point. I also want to just point out here in relation to Ukraine. This is really interesting. It's a busy tweet there from General Mike Flynn. He said, heads need to roll inside the administration. What is up with Pompeo visiting Ukraine? He was the former Secretary of State who wanted to rejoin the Trump administration, and Trump said no thanks. So Ukraine's carried out this Russian Pearl Harbor, Mike Benz writes, attack literally the day after Trump won. CIA Director and Secretary of State Mike Pompeo arrives in Kiev, as well as Senate Budget Committee Chairman Lindsey Graham, who that day pledged to override Trump policy on Ukraine. So we've got known deep staters, Pompeo, former head of the CIA, and Lindsey Graham, best mate to John McCain, both over there with Senator Richard Blumenthal, a Hillary Clinton acolyte, all three of them there in Ukraine. And the next thing we know, there's this explosion, or this attack, I should say, on the Russian nuclear facilities, etc. Something that they said had been planned for 18 months. And so Trump not aware of it, but Pompeo, Lindsey Graham, Blumenthal, their Blumenthal Democrat, Graham a Republican, is just extraordinary. So this is kind of like the calling out. So one has to wonder, are these military facilities that were attacked, were they maybe obsolete? Were they maybe going to be replaced? Because that was what some of the chatter was yesterday. In other words, is this all a great big setup? And Lindsey Graham has literally been sent to walk the plank along with Mike Pompeo because all these people are going to be rounded up in the future. That's just an interesting way of looking at it that someone pointed out to me, that perhaps it's not all as it seems, because as I mentioned earlier, what do they expect, that Putin's not going to retaliate? That he's not going to want to wipe out Kiev, for example, or something like that.
Yeah.
And at the same time, but the restraint, as we talked about yesterday, of Putin is just absolutely extraordinary.
Well,
it's just
the Clinton Foundation have already been allocated the job and the money to rebuild Ukraine. Now, I understand that there's a border conflict there, but right now, Ukraine stands. So something's going to happen to somewhere to give the Clinton Foundation a reason to rebuild Ukraine. That's what's going to happen. That's what's my concern. You know, someone said something interesting to me yesterday. They said all of these politicians that we see as highfalutin politicians, prime ministers, presidents, MPs and senators, they're middle managers. They're just middle managers who get their orders from the top. They're not what people think they are. And I'm starting to understand that politics is so much more complicated than even I know. And I've always wanted, you know, as you have, there's always been a part of me that felt that to say thank you to Australia, I would want to serve in some capacity. But the idea that I would get into a position where I felt I might be able to have a positive outcome on voting and legislation and stuff like that, and then get taken into the room and the real people who run countries come and have a little chat with you, terrifies me, right? I'm not sure I want my bubble burst that badly. It doesn't mean we're not going to hold these people to account, but clearly they're not making the decisions, Jason.
And party politics is a strange one. The Labor Party has a rule of solidarity. You must never vote against the party. And if you do, you are expelled from the party. You're therefore made an independent. They're not endorsed next time, and out you go. At least the Conservatives allow that you can vote against the party. Of course, that doesn't include what they call a conscience vote, where on certain issues you are allowed to have said vote and break from solidarity without threat of losing your position, or abstain. So that's an interesting one in itself. Now, we are towards the end of the show, which means that it is now what we call elephant in the room moment. I'll play the intro, and then I'm going to play this clip. We'll come back, play the clip. All right, I'm going to play you the clip now.
Fucking kidding me! ¿Qué pasó? Se metió un nene.
Did you see that?
That's like how Labour win elections.
In the middle
of
a running race,
I know.
a competitor knocks over the person in front,
Who was winning.
and who was winning, and just keeps running as if there's nothing going on, and the crowd reacts to it. I mean, there's a couple of points I want to make. The first thing is, and I had a chat yesterday. I happened to go to the shops and pick up a few items. I was chatting to the lady who was serving me, and we were talking about the weather, of course, being that it's flooded up, or was flooded up here, and how it affected kids' sport. And we were talking, and I had to talk about my daughter and the netball win, etc. But the thing was, it's about the fact that there's no competition in kids' sport. They pretend that it's not competitive. And I say to them, I go, if it's not competitive, why keep score? You can't have both, because if the kids count and they all want to score goals and they all want to score tries and they want to take wickets and they want to score runs and all of that stuff, but you can't tell them that it's not competitive, and especially if they want to win. So as a coach of different sports with kids, if my kids want to win, I teach them how to win. And some coaches from other teams get upset with me. I remember on one particular occasion, they said, oh, my kids aren't getting a chance to score goals. I go, mate, it's called soccer. If you want to play another sport, play another sport. But the kids are out there to kick goals. That's what they're doing. I can't pull up a bunch of, 6, 7, 8-year-old kids and say, hey, guys, don't try. Because that's not what that is. So
that's what they want, Jason. That's what the powers that be want. all of these, the wealthy call themselves the elites, the parasites. They are highly competitive and they make their children highly competitive. I've told you stories before about their mindset. And they want our children to not grow up with any kind of competitive edge, not to want to win, just to be fair, just to be equitable. None of these people are fair or equitable. So this is all indoctrination. So you keep teaching your kids how to win, because if you don't teach your kids how to win, no one else is going to teach them.
Well, if you don't teach your kids how to win, this is what happens. And that's the point. That's the point. I mean, it's just obscene. I want to put the last quote to the great Thomas Sowell. Here's a quote I found. It's just perfect. Civil rights used to be about treating everyone the same, but today some people are so used to special treatment that equal treatment is considered to be discrimination. That's how far we've come. Very interesting point. Now, I have saved over some of the more sensitive stuff from today's show. We may or may not use them in the future. Nicola, I thank you for your patience and just being so brutally open and honest in that story that is absolutely horrific. That we talk about the Diddy story, etc., but also for earlier on in the show when we brutally exposed what's happening with the vaccines, and that is the point. And I tell you what, there are people out there that will see it and will defend and deny and hate some more. But when you weigh up exactly what this says right here, underneath the yellow lines, the reason that they're not recommending COVID vaccines, this is because the risk of severe illness was extremely low in this cohort over the course of the pandemic, and benefits of vaccination are not considered to outweigh the potential harms. Well, if you're 17 and it's low risk, wouldn't the same apply at 18 and 19 and 20 and 25 and 30 and 35 and 40 and, goodness me, 45 and 50 when you go on? And as I said earlier in the show, as reporting COVID stats every single day during lockdown periods right up until and including vaccine, I kept doing it, not a single death of a female in Australia to COVID pre-vaccine, not one, zero, under 50. And there it is. So the world will be held to account at some stage, but I feel a little bit confident with RFK, what he said, Jay Bhattacharya, what he said, and Marty Makari there. Very, very good team involved there. The people are a bit concerned about Kash Patel. I'm not as worried about Kash. I think what they're doing is it's a very interesting game of chess because the language that they use is very specific. We haven't seen it in the reports. Well, we know reports are faked. Like someone made the point the other day. What is Dan Bongino going to come out and say, well, Oswald killed Kennedy because that's what the Warren report said? That's the point I'm trying to make. So very interesting. So I think we've had a terrific Wednesday. There'll be a lot more news to come Thursday, Friday. We should announce that we are going to be seen on someone else's show shortly.
Yes, Jason and I are going to close up shop here on the Daily Australian, and then we're going to zip on over digitally, and we're going to be guests on Club Grubbery with Hoodie and John Larter, and we're very excited about that because we don't have to ask the questions. We don't have to put the show together. We'll be answering questions, so that should be quite interesting. Thanks again, Jason, for today. I really appreciate you. This has been the Daily Australian with Nicola Charles and Jason Olbourne. We will do this all over again tomorrow.